In order to destroy mankind, the Communist spectre has to destroy Chinese culture first. The spectre selected China's neighbouring Soviet Union, a big country in both area and population, to conduct a preparatory rehearsal. The Soviet Union is located very close to China, and it could be a supportive force readily available to the CCP in economic, military, and geopolitical aspects. A vast territory and large population enabled the Soviet Union to escape the besiegement of European countries and survive the German invasion during World War II. Communism could thus barely stay alive there. When the Soviet Union was just established, it used its state power to export revolution, using China as its focus. The Soviet Union dispatched Vatinsky to establish a communist squad in China. Later, Borodin persuaded the Chinese Nationalist Party to accept the policy of alliance with the USSR and cooperation with the CCP, so as to allow the CCP to act like a parasite. As soon as the Soviet Union was established, it experimented with the All-Russian Extraordinary Commission, creating terror using violent slaughter abbreviated as Cheka. Lenin believed that the dictatorship is a regime that directly relies on violence and is not restricted by any laws, giving the Cheka the power to kill people without a trial. According to research from 1917 to 1922, the number of people directly hanged and executed by Cheka amounted to millions. In 1921 alone, over 5 million people starved to death in the famine caused by the CPSU. Another important experiment of the Soviet Union was to establish through violence the communist ideology based on atheism as the dominant ideology of the world. Other ideologies, be it religions or traditional culture, naturally fell into their list of things to be eliminated. Shortly after seizing power in 1917, Lenin took vehement actions, using brutality and high pressure, attacking orthodox religions and righteous belief, dragging people to be morally corrupt and moving away from the divine. This was also the rehearsal for the later destruction of Chinese culture. At the same time, Lenin continued to promote atheism, claiming that atheism is a natural and inseparable part of Marxism, of the theory and practice of scientific socialism. From the first day the Bolsheviks came to power in 1917, it reckons that smashing culture and destroying people's belief in the divine by violent means would be one of the main revolutionary goals. After Lenin's death, Stalin, as his successor, started an extremely brutal purge in the 1930s. In addition to those within the Communist Party, intellectuals and religious figures were also to be purged. Stalin announced to the nation that he would implement a 5-year atheism plan. By the time this plan was completed, the last church would be closed, the last priest eliminated, and the Soviet Union would have become the fertile soil of communist atheism, without a trace of religion. According to conservative estimates, in the Great Purge, more than 42,000 priests were persecuted to death. By 1939, the number of Orthodox churches in the Soviet Union was reduced to just over 100, whereas there were 40,437 before the October Revolution. 98% of the Orthodox churches and monasteries throughout the nation were closed. During this period, more cultural elites and intellectuals were sentenced. Some were sent to the Gulag concentration camps. Others were executed. From the death of Stalin to the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the Soviet communist regime relentlessly cracked down on various cultural elites and religions. Solzhenitsyn, a famous Russian novelist and historian, estimated that Stalin had caused 60 million abnormal deaths in total. As China is set as the stage for the 5,000-year-old drama of humankind, the last play of the battle of righteous and evil forces in the human world would be staged in China. Therefore, after it finished playing its role in the rehearsal, the Soviet communist regime collapsed and disappeared. The communist camp which used to cause such a stir also disintegrated. After the Second World War, although fascism was eliminated, the evil communist establishment was formed. At its peak, the establishment occupied 1/3 of the world's population and territories. Judging from the number of casualties, as well as the depth and breadth of the cultural upheaval, the Chinese Communist Party's evilness surpasses that of all communist regimes. The CCP's cultural extinction movement has been systematically and carefully deployed. In order to save sentient beings over time, the creator imparted traditional culture in China. Destroying traditional Chinese culture is the primary goal of the communist evil spectre. It is well aware that violence can only destroy the human body, and that only by destroying the culture using violence and various other means could it annihilate the souls of the Chinese people. Therefore, when it systematically slaughtered the elites, it also destroyed the spiritual pillars and material carriers in the traditional culture that provided spiritual support for humans. By severing the connection between divine and human, the spectre reached its goal of destroying mankind through smashing traditional culture. In its various campaigns to destroy cultural foundations, silence and eliminate the elite, the communist spectre employed all evil tactics, while maturing its means of killing, brainwashing and suppression. Thus, getting ready for the final battle of righteousness versus evil. At the same time, the CCP has systematically set up a sinister party culture with which to turn people who survived the killing into tools of the communist evil spectre to kill more people. The communist spectre also knows how to utilize economic interests, political propaganda and other means available to subdue people and play them like puppets. Political movements, suppression and mass killings one after another rendered the CCP a master of these tactics. The cultural elite consists of landlords and gentry in the rural counties, as well as merchants, intellectuals and scholars in the urban areas. They inherit the 5,000-year-old traditional Chinese culture. Purging the elites is a vital step in the CCP's destruction of traditional culture. Therefore, by fabricating enemies, the CCP started to slaughter the landlords and gentry in rural areas, and the capitalists in cities, creating terror and robbing society of its wealth. Upon coming to power, the CCP launched the so-called land reform, also known as beating the local tyrants and redistributing land, brutally murdering the cultural inheritors in rural communities. Obviously, the CCP had no intention to grant the lands to the peasants and was up to its old tricks. It first let the peasants enjoy a few benefits, but after using them to murder the gentry and ruin the cultural heritage, the CCP immediately seized the land allotted to the peasants by collectivization. Thus, the vast majority of farmers continued to suffer. The CCP also killed the urban property owners, not only because it wanted their wealth, but also because the property owners generated social wealth, kept stability and prosperity in society, and passed on traditional culture to the ensuing generations. Moreover, they embraced Western ideas of freedom and human rights. Religious believers, such as monks and Taoists, play an important role in spreading Buddhism and Taoism. The CCP thus focused its attack on religions, which connect humans to the divine. After the adherents underwent slaughter, prison sentences, brainwashing, coercive return to secular life, and distortion of sacred doctrines, the religions in China were headed by scoundrels taking orders from the CCP. The CCP set up Buddhist and Taoist associations and the like, as tools to control and destroy religions. be it those who have given up secular life for religious cultivation or the elites of the society. The loss of either means a rupture in the cultural tradition. Along with its persecution of religions, the CCP also launched campaigns of thought reform to deal with intellectuals. Through so-called education in materialism, atheism, and the theory of evolution, it systematically indoctrinated students with a hatred of traditional culture. Also, the anti-rightist movement banished all dissident intellectuals into exile in forced labor camps. They were cast down to the bottom class of society. They lost their wealth and reputation. As a result, the scholarly class, who used to control public opinion, became subjects of pacific scorn and discrimination. After the anti-rightist movement, it had become impossible to hear independent opinions, whether at home, in school, or in public. Students who grew up in the environment do not believe in gods or Buddhas, and had no respect for traditional culture and arts. However, the CCP was not satisfied. The older generations still carried strong imprints of traditional Chinese heritage. Cultural artifacts such as ancient landmarks could still be seen all over the country, and traditional values were still continuing to be passed down through various art forms. Therefore, after 1949, the CCP unleashed the youthful rebelliousness of newly brainwashed students and launched the campaign to destroy the Four Olds, a havoc that stamped out Chinese culture in both spiritual and material terms. With these campaigns of slaughter, the CCP achieved multiple goals with one stroke, harboring an extremely vicious agenda. First, it created an atmosphere of terror to suppress all resistance. Second, the wealth plundered from civil society could now be used to strengthen the regime. Third, by putting people in poverty and uncertainty, the CCP rendered them unable to consider much beyond their bare survival, with no time or energy to receive traditional education or inherit culture. Fourth, killing made people numb to the party's brutality. For if the people did not feel numb when confronted with these crimes against humanity, and if they did not find ways to rationalize the killing to themselves, then the only alternative would be to rise up in angry resistance. The process of slaughter was thus also a process of bringing down the human conscience. Fifth, the Chinese cultural heritage was severed, which caused people to lose the cultural connection that would allow them to establish predestined ties with the Creator and ultimately be saved. To what extent has the CCP succeeded in carrying out these 5 goals? From the methods of killing and the number of people killed, we may draw some conclusions. In March 1950, the CCP published its Instruction for Strict Suppression of Counter-Revolutionaries, historically known as the Campaign of Suppression of Counter-Revolutionaries. In February 1951, the CCP gave an order to stipulate that in every 1,000 people in rural area there should be at least one counter-revolutionary element. At the time, China had a population of 600 million, which means at least 600,000 lost their lives. The CCP boasted that by the end of 1952, over 2.4 million counter-revolutionary elements had been eradicated. In fact, those murdered in the campaign numbered at least over 5 million, close to 1% of the population. With one piece of statistic, we can illustrate how much damage this massacre had done to the culture. In 1949, 81.4% of the young and middle-aged people in Huangdu, Shanghai district were illiterate. Not one literate person could be found in the homes of poor and lower middle-class peasants. For instance, before 1949, 19 of the 24 households in Shenjiabang village had no schooling for 3 generations. There wasn't even a pencil in these families. To write a letter, they had to travel almost 2 miles to ask for help. In other words, killing off all the so-called landlords and rich peasants in rural areas literally meant wiping out almost all the literates in the region. If the political campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries and land reform mainly targeted landlords and gentries. The ensuing 3 anti and 5 anti campaigns were to slaughter property owners in the cities. In other words, the property owners were the ones who received traditional education and knew how to run an enterprise or a business, or who knew about the free societies in the West. It was to form an atmosphere of terror as well as loot the cities. Traditional beliefs are the source of Chinese culture. As culture is after all transmitted by the divine, traditional beliefs are directly established by the divine. Taoism, Buddhism and Confucianism have deeper and long-lasting influence in China. They tell people what a Buddha is, what a Tao is, and how to be a good person. For thousands of years, people have believed in divinities and respected them. As a result, moral standards did not decline too fast. In 1950, the CCP issued instructions to local governments, asking them to completely ban local religious organizations and vocational associations. In this nationwide campaign, the local governments mobilized those identified as the trustworthy class to report members of those communities. Governments at all levels were involved in the disbanding of superstitious organizations such as Christianity, Catholicism, Taoism and Buddhism. Members of these churches and Buddhist temples were required to register with the government and repent and declare to start anew. Otherwise, if anyone did not register in time, he or she would face severe punishment. In 1951, the government stated in official documents that those who continued to attend religious or community events would be sentenced to death or life imprisonment. Various religious groups in China have been disintegrated under the violent persecution of the CCP. The true believers in the Buddhist and Taoist religious communities have been suppressed or executed. The rest became common and mundane. Many of them are undercover communists, dressed as Buddhist monks or Taoists in order to misinterpret the Buddhist and Taoist scriptures. To find a theoretical basis for the CCP's campaigns, orthodox religions were destroyed. The village landlord, the gentry class, and the city merchants were either killed or imprisoned. The rest lived in constant fear day in and day out. As for intellectual elites, the CCP has also systematically arranged their transformation, suppression, and annihilation. The thought reform of intellectuals, especially those in universities, began during the initial phase of the CCP regime. The education experts and intellectuals from the Republic of China period are, without a doubt, the CCP's big worries. But the CCP knew that without them, universities could not operate, and no one could teach the students. So the CCP adopted the so-called adjustment of schools and departments approach. The CCP directly abolished faith-based universities because religious beliefs were incompatible with Marxism. Private schools were reformed. The departments of philosophy and sociology in the universities were abolished because students trained by these departments tends to have ideas and research on political and social issues, and to some extent embraced free thought, thus posing great challenges to the CCP regime. Meanwhile, the CCP copied the educational system of the Soviet Union. It changed the educational system from the time of the Republic of China, which respected ideological and academic freedom and carried out mandatory thought reform. In this way, faculty and students were trained to follow the commands of the CCP, focusing only on technology and forming an atheistic generation. From 1950 to 1953, through the adjustments of schools and departments, the proportion of multidisciplinary comprehensive universities in higher hearing institutions fell from 24% in 1949 to 11% in 1952. A large number of time-honored, outstanding comprehensive universities lost their well-earned value and status, and were reduced to engineering colleges, while the number of new engineering colleges experienced a burgeoning growth. As such, learning from the Soviet Union was implemented to the fullest extent. The American-style liberal arts education was used in the Republic of China period, producing a number of scholars with considerable influence and high standards. There was no shortage of talent in history, philosophy, and sociology. These humanistic scholars, influenced and educated by British and American liberalism, were incompatible with Marxist ideology and naturally labelled as petty bourgeoisie. In the humanities, studying of non-Marxist systems was suspended or cancelled. Among them, sociology as a subject disappeared completely in mainland China. Another purpose of the adjustment was to disintegrate the network of universities, departments, and key teachers remnant from the time of the Republic of China, cutting off the links between former professors and schools. This practice facilitated the communist regime's control and maneuvering of intellectuals, boosted the establishment and consolidation of totalitarianism. On October 23, 1951, Ma Ying-chul, the former president of Peking University, published an article in People's Daily titled Political Learning Movement of Peking University Faculty. Ma wrote, "The departments must be completely adjusted according to the needs of the country. In order to reach this goal, one of the most important steps is to consciously and voluntarily carry out the thought of reform." In short, the purpose of adjusting schools and departments was to carry out thought reform among education experts and intellectuals. It can be regarded as the CCP's first action since its foundation to force intellectuals to conform. Before 1949, there were about 2 million intellectuals in China. Although some of them studied in the West, they still inherited some traditional Chinese thoughts, such as cultivating one's mind, regulating the family, country, and the world. The CCP would by no means let them loose, because the thoughts of the literati official class could have tremendous influence on public opinion. Such influence was not to be ignored. In 1957, the CCP used the slogan, "100 flowers blossom, 100 schools of thoughts," to encourage intellectuals and ordinary people to help the CCP rectify its morality. The real goal was to trick anti-CCP people into exposing themselves. CCP promised not to punish or label anyone who stated their opinions with honesty, and that the one who speaks out is not guilty. The deception was effective. Some famous scholars at the time, such as Zhang Bojun, Long Yun, Luo Longji, Wu Zuguang, and Chu Anping, spoke their minds and pointed out the shortcomings of the CCP. However, the situation changed dramatically overnight, where all the people mentioned above were labelled as anti-CCP and anti-socialism rightists. This movement delineated 550,000 rightists and deprived them of 270,000 jobs. A further 230,000 people were determined to be middle rightists and anti-CCP and anti-socialism element. Their livelihood was taken away by the CCP, and their lives became barely sustainable. To survive under humiliation, these people had to be extremely careful. Besides persecuting intellectuals, this movement sent a clear signal to all Chinese people that under the communist regime, whoever tells the truth would face dire consequences. Even worse, in all kinds of movements, the CCP required everyone to participate in reporting on and criticizing others. In doing so, people were even deprived of the right to remain silent. In CCP culture, lying is one of the most notorious tricks that represent the CCP characteristics. Through multiple political campaigns, the CCP has trained Chinese people to think and do things within communist culture, rendering them well accustomed to telling lies. People not only take for granted the hypocrisy, lies, rumors, and situations in which the truth and falsehood are turned upside down, but also follow suit. Up to now, fake cigarettes, fake alcohol, fake medications, fake diplomas, and fake marriage and divorce, and so forth are commonplace in mainland China. There is no denying that the appearance and spread of omnipresent fakeness stems from people getting used to telling lies. Once people give up on the ethical bottom line of truthfulness, how far will they go towards falsehood until their conscience is stirred? The anti-rightist movement was a crucial step made by the CCP to annihilate traditional Chinese ethics and culture. With the extinction of the cultural elites, the evil communist spectre cut off the heritage of traditional Chinese culture, which had been passed down from generation to generation. The younger generations are deprived of all the education and installation of traditional culture from families, schools, societies, and neighborhoods. They became generations without a cultural heritage. After a series of movements such as the 3 Anti and 5 Anti campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries, thought reform, departments adjustment, and anti-rightist movement, which were deliberately arranged to destroy culture and slaughter various cultural elites. The elites in Chinese villages and cities who used to be the backbone of Chinese traditional culture are now basically eradicated, while at the same time the generations indoctrinated by materialism, atheism, and communist culture have grown up. This generation has now started the next step in destroying the divine culture with their vicious mindset and behavior. On May 16, 1966, the CCP published the 516 Notice of the Central Committee of the CCP and launched the Cultural Revolution, an unprecedented campaign to destroy traditional culture. In August 1966, led by the children of high-ranking CCP cadres and made up of students from secondary schools, a band of Red Guards ransacked Beijing in a frenzy of looting, assault, and killing. By the end of the month, more than 1,000 people in Beijing had been murdered. The event is now known as Red August. The atrocities of the CCP during the Cultural Revolution have been exposed in the Book of 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party. What we focus on here is to what extent those atrocities affected Chinese culture. In the massacre in Beijing's Daxing district alone, from August 27 to September 1, 1966, in the 13 People's Communes, which consisted of 48 production brigades, 325 people were killed, ages from 38 days to 80 years old. 22 families were eliminated completely. The killing methods varied from bludgeoning and stabbing to strangling. They killed infants and toddlers by stepping on one leg of the victim. And tearing him or her into two. Obviously, the executors of those atrocities were utterly devoid of conscience and humanity. The inspectors also had to forsake the heart of compassion to tolerate the entire process, which meant abandoning the value of benevolence embedded in Chinese culture. The ancients had a saying, "One who doesn't have a heart of sympathy is not considered a human being." The kind of inhumane behavior is exactly what the CCP advocates. Many were able to join the CCP precisely because of their good performances in the massacre. Take Guangxi province as an example, where according to incomplete estimates, among those who joined the CCP on a fast track during the Cultural Revolution, over 9,000 joined the CCP after they committed murders. Over 20,000 members killed someone after joining the party, and over 19,000 were involved in murdering others. In Guangxi province alone, almost 50,000 CCP members were involved in murder cases. In the events such as the June 4 Tiananmen massacre in 1989 and the persecution of Falun Gong that started in 1999, those who committed numerous murders with cruel means were all credited by the CCP with praise and rewards, and were even promoted. The most ruthless ones, such as Luo Gan and Zhou Yongkang, were promoted by Jiang Zemin to the highest ranks in the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau, as a reward for their accomplishments of killing people and destroying ethics and culture. During the persecution of Falun Gong, the CCP went all out and applied all the torture methods that ever existed in history. In addition to beating, the torture methods include sexual abuse, freezing in winter, exposing to extreme heat, physical labor beyond human limits, sleep deprivation, using venomous snakes, dogs, or mosquitoes to attack the practitioners. and even harvesting the practitioner's organs for profit. The large-scale brutality has constituted a crime against humanity. As long as one is still a human, he or she has the obligation to oppose it. However, the CCP forces all to participate in its crime to kill people, and persecute righteous religions, and or force them to acknowledge it or be an accomplice in it. As a result, many lose their ability to distinguish good from evil and right from wrong, and are thus transformed into inhuman to be of assistance to the tyrant's crimes. When the divine descends to offer ultimate salvation or for saving people, they aim at those who are still entitled to be called human beings. When the CCP compels people to become inhuman, they virtually sever their chances of being saved, pushing them into hell. When the evil spectre provokes people to commit brutality and kill others, it tells them that it is right to kill, and makes them abandon their instinctual kindness, instilling them with the party doctrine of being as relentless to your enemies as the harsh winter. The examples are too many to be numbered. Every evil act of the CCP is meant to push party culture to destroy traditions and corrupt morality. Party culture has poisoned many people to become minions or killing weapons serving the evil spectre. Gods not only create human beings, but also arrange the natural environment for them. This is particularly true in China, the land of divine, where the profound culture with its connection to the divine is also reflected in the natural environment. This is the tangible embodiment of harmony between heaven and mankind in traditional Chinese culture. In fact, all famous mountains and great rivers have deities, safeguarding the natural environment for human survival. As the central kingdom chosen by the divine, China and its mountains and rivers have a far-reaching impact on the entire Earth's ecology. In Chinese culture, the actual influence and function of geographical feng shui go beyond the space visible to the naked eye. From a high-level viewpoint, in the global water recycling system, the central kingdom is also the source of the world's freshwater arteries. Pollution of fresh water in China would impact the global water sources. Therefore, the destruction of China's environment may lead to the collapse of ecological systems worldwide. It is hence not difficult to understand why the communist spectre is bent on destroying China's natural environment. All saints, kings and emperors in every dynasty of China regularly worshipped heavenly beings and deities of mountains and rivers. Humbly and gratefully, they enjoyed the living environment granted by nature. For thousands of years, the reverent Chinese people had been living in harmony with their natural environment. However, after the communist evil spectre took power, with violence and deception, it dissuades people from believing in harmony between heaven and mankind. It calls on them to destroy the natural environment blessed by the divine. It encourages people to challenge heaven and earth, exerting the evil side of human nature. People resort to destroying the environment willfully in order to make money. It led people to become self-conceited, without the slightest awe and respect towards the natural environment. When ancients logged the forest for firewood and building material, they always protected the trees that had not become timber yet, allowing no casual wood cutting. After the CCP took power, however, destructive forestation practices were widely adopted. Forest resources were destroyed for immediate benefits, regardless of the consequences. For example, the area of Changbai Mountains, where small trees were cut down. Even trees only an inch thick were not spared, which were cut off for making brooms. In many cases, the large acreages of forests were shaved away. Loss of vegetation led to soil erosion. As a result, of course, various disasters or heavenly punishments were inflicted one after another. However, the atheists spread by the CCP would definitely deny the connection therein. The entire environment of the universe, the earth and humankind, is circular in the cycle of life. When one is virtuous, having little karma, one's reincarnation doesn't have much of a bad effect on the natural environment. But as more and more karma was accumulated, people eventually brought the karma into their living environment, affecting everything around. Decertification is one of the bad consequences. Since the CCP took power, people's morality has declined drastically, with their karma increasing dramatically. They wasted natural resources and destroyed the natural environment wantonly. China's great rivers and mountains are in ruins, and the areas of desert have grown rapidly. From the 1950s to the 1970s, China saw 1,560 square kilometers of land swallowed by deserts every year. It expanded to 2,100 square kilometers from the 1970s to the 1980s, 2,460 square kilometers in the 1990s, and more than 3,000 square kilometers in the 21st century. 3 of the 5 grasslands that once made Inner Mongolia famous have almost disappeared. It only took 20 years for large-scale degradation and desertification. In the 3 major grasslands, namely Wulan Chabul, Hawkwin and Ordos, a desert in Huailai County, Hebei Province, appeared and grew so quickly that people call it the Heavenly Desert. It is only 70 kilometers away from Beijing. Perhaps Beijing will be the next lowland city, an ancient city submerged in the desert. The CCP arbitrarily cut down trees, blocked rivers and filled up the sea, challenging heaven and earth. It has already destroyed the environment that the divine created for human beings. More and more disasters of various kinds appeared. Flooding rivers, toxic fog and haze, billowing sandstorms, drought and water shortage, industrial pollution, cutting off of earth and water veins. The record of frequent occurrences of extreme climates were broken one after another, not to mention many horrible and strange diseases that have taken people's lives. How soul-stirring it is for every witness. From the violent killings of the elites, to the destruction of spiritual and material environments humans rely on, to the brutal eradication of the traditional culture that defines humanity. These are all but steps in the evil spectre's scheme to destroy humanity systematically. After the Cultural Revolution commenced, a campaign to destroy the 4 olds rampaged across China. Temples, Taoist monasteries, Buddha statues, famous historical sites, calligraphies, paintings and artifacts were almost wiped out. The time-honored pavilion on which the preface of the Orchid Pavilion was written by Wang Shizhi was totally destroyed, not sparing even his tomb. The former residents of Wu Cheng'en in Jiangsu Province and Wu Jingzi and Anhui Province were both smashed by the Red Guards. The stone tablet embedded with Su Dongpo's handwritten copy of an account of the old Topper's Pavilion. The words on the tablet were etched off. These artifacts are the essence of Chinese culture and have stood the test of time and were passed down for thousands of years. Once destroyed, they cannot be recovered. The city of Beijing was established during the Yuan dynasty. The first emperor, Kublai Khan, had the Prime Minister Liu Bingzhong construct the city according to the layout of the Heavenly Palace and the sign of Cosmos. The entire city of Beijing was suffused in the ideology and culture of Confucianism, Taoism and Buddhism. The names of the gates of the city and the grand palaces had their origins in the Cosmos sign in the Book of Changes. The temples, monasteries and palaces were all built according to celestial constellations. Beijing's famous Siheyuan compounds, with small courtyards within a larger courtyard, are not only unique but are constructed based on the structure of the cosmos body. with some of the main rooms inside built like temples. The idiom, "the winding path leads to quiet seclusion," is the most befitting description of Beijing's alleys. After entering the Siheyuan through the secluded path, you suddenly find yourself as if entering into another intriguing world. What an exquisite architectural treasure! It combines the people's faith in heaven and the divine, the traditional concept of unification of human and cosmos, with the surrounding environment and building. It is virtually a peerless masterpiece of its time. But most of the Siheyuan compounds have been destroyed during the campaign to destroy the Four Olds in the Cultural Revolution, and the so-called development and construction afterwards. Before the Cultural Revolution, Beijing was home to over 500 ancient temples, palaces, and monasteries, which were practically all destroyed after the campaign to destroy the Four Olds. All of this not only destroyed the place of worship and cultivation for the believers, the architecture embodying the integration of human and cosmos, but also destroyed the righteous faith in people's hearts and the traditional righteous thoughts of the harmony of heaven and mankind. People may disagree or feel that this has nothing to do with them, but the evil spectre of communism infiltrates without exception, from the destruction of the physical body to the pollution of the mind, to the ransacking of the cultivation environment and laces of orthodox religions. It has severed the inheritance of Chinese culture, morality and beliefs that have lasted for thousands of years. The several thousand cities in China have a long-standing history. Every city has walls, temples and monasteries. The cultural monuments are everywhere. Dig a foot down and you'll see some relics. If you dig 2 feet, 3 feet, 20 feet down, the artifacts of various historical periods manifested are innumerable. In the universe, all kinds of theories, beliefs, literature and art forms, architecture and customs, etc. have both manifestation in the human dimension and forms of existence in other dimensions. When one person reads a book or does something, it may account for nothing. But when thousands upon thousands of people are reading the same book, doing the same thing and having similar thoughts, that would generate enormous fields in other dimensions, which in turn support the thing, the form, the architecture and custom, etc. in the surface dimension. Without the fields behind, the object, architecture and form, etc. within this dimension would not have as much power. This is also why in the West, people believe that the co-occurrence of Friday and the 13th is unlucky, but in Eastern society it has no effect whatsoever. However, traditions of the East, such as regarding certain places as having good feng shui, have no significant impact in the West. This is because the underlying field in other dimensions is not strong enough. Ancient temples, cities, monasteries and historical sites and so forth, which lasted thousands of years and earned the respect of tens of millions of people with the same faith, possess powerful material elements behind, especially the palaces of the temples of orthodox religions. After consecration, they have the increased support of enlightened beings who protect life and the populace. When these substances and architecture are destroyed, the fields and the higher beings behind them are unable to reside there. What is destroyed is not only the architecture or form on the surface, but also the righteous energy field behind, which embodies the integration of human and cosmos, and reinforces the righteous thoughts and beliefs in the human dimension. The protection of enlightened beings is also lost when they leave. In recent years, the CCP began large-scale construction projects, rebuilding temples and monasteries, and refurbishing historical sites, with the intention of deception, making a profit, counterfeiting or keeping up appearances. This can only result in inciting evil spirits, rotten demons, and a negative energy field to occupy these places, inflicting instead boundless disasters. The evil spectre of communism is fully aware of this, and so they are destroying the cultural elites in a city, the gentry level in the rural areas in an effort to corrupt the morality of people. At the same time, they destroyed the material medium and spiritual pillars of the traditional culture, such as temples and monasteries, physical remnants of the divinely imparted culture, traditional customs, literary forms, cultural and historical relics, books, literature, traditional residential houses, etc. The 5,000 character long Tao Te Ching left behind by Lao Tzu is a classical scripture of the Taoist cultivation school. Lao Tzu is revered as the founder of Taoism, but during the Cultural Revolution he was denounced as a hypocrite, and the Tao Te Ching was labelled as feudalistic superstition. On Confucius' travels to many countries, he talked about Ren, benevolence, Yi, righteousness, Li, propriety, Zhi, wisdom, Xin, faithfulness, and the doctrine of the mean. His 6 classics revised how the late emperors governed the nation and the criteria for being a proper person. Thus he was called the greatest sage and teacher by the later generations. During the Cultural Revolution, Confucius was criticized and was given a condescending name, Kong No. 2. Benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, faithfulness, and the golden mean, etc. were replaced by violence, struggle, and rebellion. In 1966, Kang Sheng ordered Tan Holan, the head of the rebels in Beijing, to act under the name of the Cultural Revolution Squad and lead the Red Guards to Chufu to rebel against Confucius and his family. They obliterated without restraint, burned ancient texts, smashed nearly 1,000 stone tablets of various ages, including Confucius' tomb, and destroyed the Confucius temple, residence, and mausoleum. What's more infuriating is that they leveled the tomb of Confucius, dug out the graves of his clan members, and denounced the exposed corpses for several days before burning them. This already is not a simple matter of destroying ancient books and records and cultural and historical relics, because these records bear the profound and enriched Chinese culture and traditional values. If this traditional culture were treated with the slightest reverence, such destruction would not have taken place. Such violent and thorough destruction was done by the CCP, through deeply implanting hatred towards traditional culture in the minds of the Red Guards. In ancient China, Buddhism was persecuted a few times. Every emperor that persecuted Buddhism either was assassinated or died suddenly due to illness. People who believe in the divine know that this was retribution for persecuting Buddhism. The Emperor Shizong Cairong of the Zhou dynasty once personally cut the chest of a bodhisattva's statue in the Dabei temple with an axe. In the end, he died of a festering chest wound. If the young people who persecuted Buddhism and Taoism under the instigation of the CCP don't repent and atone for their crimes, what tragic future is in store for them? Throughout the ferocious campaign to destroy the Four Olds, it is unknown how many people have committed sins that would condemn them to hell. Yet this is exactly the result the CCP wants. Towards the end of the Cultural Revolution, people began to exercise for fitness. Ancient exercises such as Wu Qin Shi, 5 Animals Qigong, Tai Chi Chuan, and Yi Jin Jing became popular, and the Qigong upsurge quickly emerged. In May 1992, Mr. Li Hongzhi spread Falun Gong based on truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Falun Gong is also called Falun Dafa. The Great Way is extremely simple and easy. It all started from the alleviation of illnesses and improvement in health, and within just a few years, spread by word of mouth, over 100 million people started to practice Falun Gong. Falun Gong practitioners can be found across China and around the world. Falun Gong rectifies the hearts and minds of people. Falun Gong practitioners cultivate benevolence and purify themselves, restore people's faith in gods and Buddhas. As such, they are regarded as a thorn in the side by the evil spectre. On the other hand, the spread of Falun Gong facilitates the restoration of faith and uplifts the morality of the entire society. Moreover, the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance also include the essence of traditional Chinese culture. With the widespread practice of Falun Dafa, more and more people started cultivation. This inevitably puts humankind back on the righteous track and leads the nation back to its clear and bright governance. The ultimate goal of the communist's evil spectre is to prevent human beings from being saved by the Creator. This is done by destroying culture and moral values. Naturally, the spectre regards Falun Gong as its greatest enemy. In July 1999, Jiang Zemin, the head of the CCP at that time, could not wait to launch the overall persecution of Falun Dafa and all its practitioners. The Great Way treats all living beings, including those negative beings, with compassion, giving them many chances to allow them to stop being hostile and gain a renewed life. However, The communist evil spectre insists on being hostile toward DAFA and cultivators. Utilizing media, the public security and armed police forces, the CCP slanders, arrests and imprisons many Falun Gong practitioners. In a central meeting on implementing the persecution of Falun Gong, Jiang Zemin arrogantly declared, "I don't believe it's impossible for the Communist Party to conquer Falun Gong. Falun Dafa students cultivate themselves to be more compassionate and have a healthy body. There were over 100 million Falun Gong practitioners at the time. If we take into account the families and friends, what a huge number of people we will be talking about. How could they possibly be shut down so easily?" Jiang Zemin's order of genocide against Falun Gong practitioners was to defame their reputations, bankrupt them financially, and destroy them physically. This is the manifestation of decades of cumulative communist evilness. The panic atmosphere stems from decades of killing and allows the CCP to conduct the persecution without massive overt killings. The communist evil spectre uses economic tactics to blackmail the free nations so effectively that they cannot stop the CCP's persecution policy. At the same time, the CCP covertly carries out the violent killings and persecution. Countless Falun Dafa practitioners were wrongfully sentenced, detained, tortured, or killed. Some even had their organs taken alive, which is ignored by many in the world. Many people became silent after years of oppression, brainwashing, and killing by the CCP, with some even complying against their conscience, taking part in the persecution, without realizing that they are jumping on the boat of destruction. There was an odd phenomenon at the time. Many of the Dafa practitioners detained at labor camps or prisons faced similar choices. In particular, at the beginning stage of the persecution, namely, as long as practitioners could sign their name on some paper, such as a letter of guarantee, a letter of regret, to promise to stop practicing Falun Gong and denounce Falun Gong, all torture would immediately stop. Some were even released back home right after signing these documents. These phenomena are particularly odd. In the CCP's political movements in the past, even if the victims under attack confessed their guilt, they remained to be detained, were subjected to denunciation, torture, or even death penalty, and had no choice of their own. However, it seems that whether a Falun Gong practitioner suffered torture or could obtain freedom or not was a matter of their own decision. Does this mean the CCP became better? The answer is certainly no. For all the devout Falun Gong practitioners, they had to endure extreme torture beyond human imagination. Judging from the types, extremeness, and breadth of these torture methods, the CCP's brutality hasn't changed a bit, but has become even worse. However, it seems that as soon as a Falun Gong practitioner gives up practicing, the CCP seems to let them free. This strategy precisely portrays the purpose of the CCP, to genuinely destroy human beings. Not only destroy the physical body, but also destroy people's soul. The party launched the persecution partly because of its inherent hatred towards God and the divine, and partly because of the fact that the spread of Falun Gong has brought back spiritual beliefs in the society and uplifted the moral realms of people, not to mention that the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance encompass the essence of traditional Chinese culture. From the perspective of the CCP's evil spectre, whose goal is to destroy culture and moral values, and to prevent mankind from being saved by the Creator, Falun Gong is certainly regarded as its primary enemy. The communist evil spectre collects the essences of the world's worst torture methods, surpassing all torture ever existed in history, and culminating in the live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. The worst ever tortures on this human planet are utilized to slaughter Falun Gong students. From the perspective of the evil spectre, Falun Gong practitioners' firm faith and dauntlessness negates the numerous methods of torture that used to be always effective in the past, particularly for those Falun Gong practitioners whom they cannot reform or cannot do anything about. Live organ harvesting emerged as a vital persecution tactic for the CCP. The huge financial profits not only fed the persecution, but also attracted people around the world to go to China to have organ transplantation to stay alive. The action of buying organs obtained from living Falun Gong practitioners makes the person an accomplice in the CCP's atrocities. This is indeed what the evil wants, to eradicate humanity and destroy humankind as a whole. On July 7, 2006, David Matas, Canadian human rights lawyer, and David Kilger, former senior member of the Parliament of Canada, published the first edition of Bloody Harvest, Organ Harvesting of Falun Gong Practitioners in China. This report provided 18 types of evidence to prove that the CCP's crime of harvesting organs from Falun Gong practitioners indeed exists. The report refers to the crime as a form of evil yet to be seen on this planet. With the help from international investigators, in June 2016, Bloody Harvest, The Slaughter, an update was published. With 680 pages and nearly 2,400 references, unveiled the true characteristics of the CCP's crime of organ harvesting and its hideous scale. On June 13, 2016, based on all the existing investigations and evidence, the US House of Representatives unanimously passed House Resolution 343, condemning the CCP for forcefully harvesting organs from Falun Gong practitioners and other prisoners of conscience. It calls to conduct a credible, transparent and independent investigation on the CCP's organ transplant abuse. The free world finally came to realize the extent of evilness displayed in the CCP's persecution of Falun Dafa and its followers. In the past century, over 100 million around the world were killed by communism. On the soil of the former USSR and under the Berlin Wall, how many innocent souls are still suffering? With the support from the former USSR and the CCP, other communist regimes also murdered countless citizens of their own. Take a country as small as Cambodia, for example, where up to several million people were murdered under Pol Pot's communist regime. The white bones piling up in the Million People's Pit document the atrocities of the communist Red Demon. The history of communism is a history of killing, with each page stained with the blood of innocent victims, recording the brutal killing path of the communist evil spectre over the past century. The purpose of chronicling the CCP's history of murder and eradication of culture is not only to expose these genocides and destructions themselves, but also to show that these are the two means which the communist evil spectre uses to destroy mankind. At the same time, it discloses both the consequences that are visible on the surface and the horrific ending that is not perceived by the people of this world for the time being. Amid this wave of destruction of traditional culture and decline in morality, most people go with the tide, having lost their abilities to understand God's teachings in the end, and facing total destruction. However, how many of these people realize that the final havoc is imminent? The CCP's evil spectre disregards the mercy of the divine and insists on its arbitrary will. Now its evilness has reached its peak and ultimate end. Good is rewarded and evil faces its retribution eventually. It is the perpetual truth of the universe that good will conquer evil. For the people of this world, keeping their pure and compassionate nature, abiding by the moral guidelines, proper thought and behavior set by the divine for humans, and returning to the path of tradition are the true guarantee to a safe crossing in the havoc of life and death.